Hi everyone, my name is Amy with Eating Healthy, Spending Less, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how to make the most amazing sourdough cinnamon swirl raisin bread. You don't want to miss it. The night before, you want to prepare your dough. You want to start out with a very active sourdough starter. So I like to feed it the morning of when I'm making the dough that evening. First, you're going to measure out your starter. Then you're going to add lukewarm filtered water. Every time you add an ingredient, you want to make sure that you zero out your food scale. That way you know exactly how much of each ingredient you are adding. Next, we're going to add unbleached flour. You can honestly use any flour you want. I just typically go for an unbleached variety. For the exact measurements, just head on over to my website. There's a direct link in the description box. Honey adds a wonderful flavor to this loaf of bread that is just delicious. Then you want to add your salt and raisins. Raisins are optional, but we really enjoy them. Now you're just going to stir all the ingredients together. Stir as best you can in the bowl. Soon, we're going to dump it all out on the countertop and knead it. Make sure to take off any jewelry so you don't get dough stuck in it. The dough is going to be really sticky, and that's okay. Have a little cup of flour nearby that you can use to sprinkle on more flour. The goal is to make this dough no longer sticky. So you're just going to keep kneading it, adding flour, and continuing to knead it until you get a nice, beautiful loaf. This should take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. You could use a KitchenAid with a dough attachment. Though I have not done it before with this recipe, I'm sure it would work. I like to use my hands. It's my favorite way of making sourdough bread. There's just a lot of love in a loaf of bread when you use your hands. I highly recommend you do that. Now we're just going to take some cling wrap and wrap the bowl. I like to do 2 layers to make sure that no air comes out. And then we're just going to let it sit overnight at room temperature. If you find that your dough is a little bit sticky the next morning, that's okay. Sometimes that happens when it's a little bit warmer in the house, like during the summer months. So this recipe makes 2 loaves of bread. I like to use my food scale to make sure that I get the same amount of dough in each loaf. That way the size of your loaves are the same and they will bake up beautifully. Now that your dough balls are the same size, it's time to do your first pre-shaping. This is just like my normal sourdough bread that I've taught you guys before. You're just going to do a pre-shaping like so. and let the dough rest for 20 minutes. If you're not familiar with pre-shaping, basically it's a way to fold your dough so that you can get a really nice dough ball. This gives your bread great texture once it's baked, and it really helps with the rising process. So make sure that you do a pre-shaping. Now I'm just going to let the loaves of bread rest and add a piece of cling wrap over the top. I'm using a piece from the bowl that I used to wrap the bowl the night before. And then I'm just going to put a towel over the top. Set your timer for 20 minutes and we'll be right back. Now that the dough has rested, it's time to make those beautiful swirl patterns in our bread. You want a nice floured surface, but just know that if your rolled bread has any flour on it, when you put it in the pan, it will show once baked. So make sure that you rub it in nicely. Use a rolling pin and roll out your dough. You want it to be in a rectangular shape, and the width of it will determine on the size of a loaf pan that you use. I have extra long loaf pans, but then I also have standard size ones that I like to use. So it's completely up to you. As far as the thickness goes, you can make this as thin or as thick as you'd like. I always shoot for about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch thick. Now we're going to add applesauce. That's right. Normally, you might see people use butter, but I try and stay away from butter as we do not use dairy in this house, and applesauce works beautifully. Definitely try it. You're going to love the results. Now we're going to sprinkle a dry sweetener over the top. You can use brown sugar, coconut sugar, or here I'm using sucanat. Sucanat is the most natural form of cane sugar that you can actually get. It's wonderful and it tastes great. So use whatever dry sweetener you like. Now we're just going to sprinkle as much cinnamon as you love on your bread. I like a lot, and so I generously sprinkle a lot of cinnamon on top. Starting on the shorter end, it's time to roll this up. I like to do tight, small rolls, that way you get more cinnamon flavor throughout the loaf of bread. If you are using a non-stick loaf pan or a glass pan, I highly recommend greasing it or putting in a piece of parchment paper like I've done. When I use my silicone pans, I never have to do this. It's time to let your loaves of bread rest for 1 hour. This will give the dough time to rise. You're going to have beautiful loaves of bread to put into the oven. As you can see here, my loaves of bread split at the top. I was kind of disappointed when I first saw that, but honestly, it doesn't matter and it'll bake up beautifully. You want to put a pan of water on the lower rack of your oven and preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Place all your loaves of bread in the oven and bake for 10 minutes, then lower the temperature to 375 degrees and bake an additional 30 minutes. Allow the bread to cool for 10 minutes before taking it out of the loaf pans. Friends, I am so excited for you to give this delicious sourdough cinnamon raisin swirl bread a try. I will leave the link to the recipe in the description box below. Let me know what you think. Cheers. Bye-bye.